new version of the podcast. I'm really excited about this one. The lead up to this one with all of the intelligence and all of the SIGINT that we've covered over the past week, just like digging into it. I think it's going to be really cool. So first off, let's go over the invite. Some people had some problems with it. Some people didn't. The link that was encoded was a Caesar cipher. So let's go over Caesar cipher really quick. Of course, it's Julius Caesar. He used it during his, I guess, personal communication. Basically what it is it's just a shift in the alphabet, right? So let's say it's a 3-letter shift. A becomes C, right? So, you know, it's the very first, like Simon says, the very first cipher that was used. And ciphers have been around for a very, very, very long time. They used it during the Revolutionary War. They used it against the war in England. You know, it's been around for a long time. So my background, I come from a SIGINT background. I did signal intelligence to start out with. And basically that's decoding messages. My specialty was intercepting voice communications and Morse code and deciphering stuff. You know, and there's several different versions of Morse code. Some of it is a little bit more trickier than others. So we spent the last week looking through all the different types of number stations. And that's what really got me excited about this one. So I was able to go through and find an online radio that a university in the Netherlands is hosting. And you can actually look at and listen to some of the AM frequencies on the wideband. And there's a website that will actually post the schedule for number stations. So earlier I uploaded a file from, I think it's E11, which is a Polish number station. And it's been going on for a very long time. You know, and what's funny is, like, so we looked at the messages, started to decode some of it. And there's a website that Mike's going to put up, PRI, I think mon.org. So in that same website, they also decode some of the messages and give you the format as to, you know, what they're doing. So the very first segment is they identify the agent that they're talking to, and then they read out a string of numbers. So these numbers, you know, for most people, if you look at it, you can't really figure it out, right? But when you look at a one-time pad, and I'm keeping Mike busy over here, the one-time pad actually, that's what they use to decipher the messages. So the one-time pad, the agent has it on their side and the number station has it on the other side. And so they formulate the messages according to the one-time pad, and then it's read and burn, basically. So this has been going on since, you know, the Cold War era, even before then. So there's a couple things we're going to go over. The online radio, if you get a chance, look at that. It's the second link up that Mike posted. And the very last link that he posted will give you the schedule. So you have several different modes of transmission on AM. You have Morse, which was what the link was encoded in. And then you have USB, which is upper sideband, LSB, which is lower sideband, and SSTV, which is really cool. So it's slow scan TV. And slow scan TV, you can take an image. The ISS satellite, or the ISS station, has satellite communications, and they will actually look through and grab JPEGs and take photos, and they'll send that back to Earth via slow scan. Let me get somebody in here. So, you know, if you're a radio operator or if you have access to a radio, you can actually grab that communication on SSTV and decode it, and you'll actually have a photo, right? So there's some other things I'm going to talk about later on that are really cool as far as exfiltration. So a lot of us work in security and pen testing and other types of cybersecurity. So when you go to do a pen test, exfiltration through the network is sometimes difficult, right? So you have to worry about, the IDS or Darktrace or whatever platform grabbing your exfiltration and outing you during the pen test. But one thing that most companies don't have is something to monitor RF, right? So RF, you can actually take coded messages and send it out through RF. You have the slow scan TV. Plus, we're working on, I'm actually getting the chips in the mail this week from a friend of mine named James. That's part of a large intelligence company, but it is an FM transmitter, FM AM transmitter for an Arduino. And for those of you who don't know what an Arduino is like Raspberry Pi, just a different flavor. So basically this chip, we can exfiltrate data that we've collected during a pen test or intelligence and siphon it out through FM or AM and collect it on the other side. I've got a lot of people joining. So it's really cool, and it bypasses all of the known controls for modern day cybersecurity. There's a reason why number stations and RF has been around for a very long time. It's very hard to control as far as transmissions go. So one of the transmissions I want to talk about that some of you guys in the UK probably have heard about is a Lincolnshire poacher. I'll have Mike post the link for that. Basically what it was the Lincolnshire poacher, there's like a tune to it, right? And it's a series of, it sounds like a flute almost, and then it goes into a number station. For the longest time, everybody thought after World War II, that was actually the UK transmitting that signal to their agents, when in reality, it ended up being a ship in Cyprus that was transmitting it. So, I mean, there's a lot of obfuscation around it. And now they've even got to the point where people are DXing, which is like long distance grabbing signals. I'm part of a group that does that currently, and they've collected stuff on SIPRNet, NIPRNet. They've collected stuff on Urgent Link. Urgent Link is what they use for emergency communications now. So FEMA has moved away from their old platform and moved to Urgent Link. I don't think we have a link for that. But anyways, the DX groups actually focus on collecting those signals. They can identify the ships, they can identify the signals, and even to the point sometimes where they can identify the format of the message. And so that's what I'm getting into, especially like with CW, which is Morse code, looking at some of those messages and trying to decipher them. There's one that's really cool that has been around forever. It disappeared a couple times, but the theory behind it is if this signal stops, the world's in trouble. And it's called the Russian buzzer. And it's a placeholder for the Russian military, and it just buzzes constantly. And every once in a while, they'll break in with a series of numbers to different Russian agents. So people have been following it for many, many years. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me and we'll talk through it. If you have anything you want me to cover that I'm not covering, speak up. I'm only one person. So let's go over one-time pads. I'll have Mike post the one-time pad link. So one-time pads. So every agent, and there's a really cool movie called The Number Station with John Cusack. And in this movie, he plays an agent. and he controls a reader or a cryptologist, which is what I was in the military, that reads off the numbers. And they use a one-time pad to decipher the message, and then they burn it. So with a one-time pad, basically what it is, it's a series of numbers that matches up with letters of the alphabet. It's only good for one time. Each sheet is only good for one message. And usually what it starts out with, like I said before, is the agent that is receiving the message. They'll go through a series of numbers in the very beginning of the message. And I'll post one of these messages so that you guys can get a feel for it. But they'll identify the agent with the first three numbers. And if it's a null message, it'll be the same pattern over and over again. But if there's like a legit instruction for that agent or officer, then they'll list the numbers. And I'll go ahead and post one of those right now. And these also, like the link that was posted earlier with the online AM radio or wideband radio is where I collected these signals. So these are real live recordings from number stations that are active on radio frequencies, like as we speak. So I had a lot of fun doing this one. I looked at some Morse code. I got involved with some groups that I probably wouldn't normally get involved with. And looking at like the history behind it all was like really cool. I think me and Mike stayed up for hours just listening to AM broadcast and trying to scan through the stations. And you can actually build your own number station as well. They have, so you can transmit over the internet. I wouldn't suggest you do it over AM because the FCC may try to hunt you down. But you can host your own website, do your own number station, have your own one-time pad. And they also have, as most of you guys saw who decoded the Morse code, they have text to Morse code audio. So you can record the Morse code, post it on a website or stream it from a specific IP, maybe a Tor IP, to whoever you want to. And that message is obfuscated unless they have that one-time pad. And you can create your own one-time pads. So on linuxcoffee.com/numbers, you can actually create your own one-time pads, which is really cool. I took a look at that yesterday. I haven't done it yet, but it's really cool. So there's all kinds of methods as far as wanting to, wait a minute, I missed the last meeting, Mike. I wanted to ask you if you have ever crossed paths with the Maze, who recently confirmed that they stopped their service, or maybe can share with us what you know about them, if you don't mind. Actually, AK, I can't, simply because of the fact that the Maze has kind of a legal situation. So I won't comment on that. I'll let them fend for themselves. Justice, I'm trying really hard to listen to what you're saying. Would it be possible to bring the white noise down a wee? I don't know how to do the white noise. Let me move the microphone a little bit closer. So back to what I was saying. There's several ways that you can exfiltrate data out of networks. You have like command and control infrastructure, you have IRC, you have SSH, you have RF that most people don't use. But one of the other ones that you don't have is DNS. And I don't know if you guys know about the DNS exfiltration of data, but that is one of the projects that I did a couple years ago with the company I was working for, to look and see if Darktrace, which is an AI ML platform, could detect the exfiltration of data via DNS queries. And we'll post a link to that. That should be up there. Yeah. But it's really cool. So like if you have Wireshark and you're collecting, let's say, port 53 traffic externally, and I'm sending this message out to your IP address, I can encode secret messages or any kind of data that I want into that packet, into the DNS queries. Another really cool obfuscation method that I was working on when I developed VAST, the distro, was exfiltrating data through voice over IP packets. So voice over IP packets are pretty unique in the fact that they have a lot of extra space in the packet. So we actually chunked a database into several different chunks and shoved them out through voice over IP packets. The only thing you have to remember when you do that is the person on the other end has to know it's coming and has to know how to decode it. If not, the message gets pretty lost. So pirate radio is one of the things that, so if you got onto AM tonight and decided you wanted to create a number station, it would be considered a pirate radio, which is illegal. Governments get away with it. Listening stations don't have a problem with it. But you and I, the FCC may come knock on your door, especially if you have like an amateur radio license, they may. But we found all kinds of really cool ways to get messages, listen to broadcast. One of them was the RTL SDR. I was going to show that tonight, but it's actually boxed up and put on the patio because the antenna that RTLSDR.com sent me didn't have the SMA connectors for the antenna. So I'm getting that replaced. But in order to hit the medium frequencies, which is where the number stations are at, you have to have the ham it up module that kind of up converts the signal. So there's a lot of things that go into radio, like signal propagation, frequency amplification, PRI, PRF, a lot that I can't really like dive into because it took me years to learn. It's not something that you can just learn overnight. But with the online broadcast, I mean, the possibilities are limitless. Like there's so much out there. Like today I found like a rogue Morse code station. So with that website that has an AM like wideband broadcast, they have it labeled, right? So where they have like China, some of the ships for the US Navy, for the Russian Navy, for various, maritime, they have them labeled on different frequencies, but sometimes you'll find like a random Morse code pop up in between the frequencies. So I collect all of that data, and the future, I really want to work on decoding some of that and looking at the format of those different messages. Cuba is one good one. So in the US, if you live in the US on the Gulf Coast, Cuba has a number station that plays continuously. It's on a schedule, and you can catch that schedule on the link that we posted previously, the priyam.org or whatever. So I'm like really excited about radio. I've been doing radio since about 2003. I was stationed in Virginia at the Joint Forces Intelligence Command, and I was guarding the American Taliban at the brig, and had plenty of time to study. So I got the technician manual for ham radio and studied that one weekend and took the test, got my license. And since then I've been running wild with it. My dad was also, he's also licensed for ham radio, and my grandfather as well. So, I mean, when disaster hits, 9/11, I talked about this on the last podcast. When 9/11 hit, cell phone usage was pretty much null and void in New York because the circuits were overloaded and the towers. So ham radio operators had to step in and set up emergency emergency communications for people that needed messages getting out of New York. So it comes in really useful. We live on about 27 acres in the middle of nowhere, and going to be building an antenna for RF so that we can do some of this long distance collection of data. So I'm going to open it up to you guys. You guys ask me questions. If there's anything that you want to hear me dive into as far as RF, radio, number stations, go for it. It's your chance. And you can unmute, please unmute. Everybody's unmuting. So I'll keep talking while you guys come up with your questions. Stop me whenever you want to. So what exactly did you start with when you got interested in RFs? So funny thing is, when I originally got started with RF, I was a kid, and I had an electronics kit that my parents had decided to buy for me, and I developed a RF kit that you plug into the phone. Back then we had landlines, and you could take apart the phone, and there's two wires inside the phone. It's two pair, and the RF kit that I built plugged into those, like alligator clamped into those two copper wires. So whatever transmission was going through that phone, you could sit out in a parking lot and tune to a specific frequency and listen to the conversation. So it was basically a phone tap. It's not a whole lot of that now, although with SDR, with the RTL SDR, you can actually collect GSM. Hack 5 has a video on this, and I thought it was really cool. So you can't actually collect like the voice data or the actual text message, but the headers have a lot to do with the information, right? So it'll give you the phone number that's originating from the carrier and the recipient. And really that's all you really need to know as far as like identifying who they're communicating with. But there's also ways to actually get that audio. I can't really go into that because it's against the law, but yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah, old school wiretapping. Yeah, and just to let you guys know, our wireless or our internet or Wi-Fi is pretty spotty because we live on top of a mountain. And to put things in perspective, we have LTE instead of fiber or cable. So you have to bear with us. Alan Turing machine was based on RF. Absolutely. And actually, Alan Turing, if you read the book Cryptonomicon, is about Alan Turing. And Bletchley Park, I believe is the name of it, over in the UK. But yeah, it was based on RF. So some of the other things that got me interested in RF was RF jamming, cell phone jamming. When I worked at USGFCOM and the Joint Force Intelligence Command, we had white noise playing in the hallways. We had music playing. Basically, the whole building was a Faraday cage. And that really is the only way to obfuscate, eavesdropping when it comes to RF. We had to lock our cell phones up in the lobby in basically a safe that was Faraday cage. So you can understand the level of security there. But when you look at businesses and commercial entities, that doesn't happen. So there's all kinds of opportunities to exfiltrate data. And what we've gotten to now, like with IP and voice over IP and machine learning and AI, is we've locked down the ether side of it. But what about the old RF school stuff that nobody seems to care about anymore? Like with the RTL SDR, I can actually look at what you're looking at on your screen just based off the emission from your monitor. So every electronic device that you plug in that has to go into a wall socket gives off some sort of RF or RF signature. So my job in the military was, let me back up. The training that I went through to get to where I was in the military, we had a lab. We went through 14 weeks of advanced math and cryptology. And then one of the tests that we had to go through before we graduated was we were sitting in a lab with oscilloscopes and spectrum analyzers, and we were given a very, I don't want to say faint signal, but it was very hard to determine what the signal was. And we had chiefs and petty officers behind us screaming at us while we were trying to analyze the signal to figure out what it was. It was actually a weapon, more specific, like a missile. And we had to determine velocity, speed, point of impact, and ETA. So the joke in the Navy was, if you see the CT swim team running to the flight deck, you might want to follow them, because usually we know when the missiles are coming and the rest of the ship doesn't. What type of bulb? I know there are several types of devices that are used for eavesdropping.
He said there was one that was used, and so that's what I want to know.
Possible. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So after we went through the training, the Joint Force Intelligence Command has different DIs. I worked in DI5 and DI6. I worked for the J6. And we did all kinds of stuff. We looked for the downed pilot, Michael Stryker, during the Gulf War. We analyzed signals. We listened to conversations. NavSec grew at different ports, especially in Virginia. We'll listen to radio traffic from incoming vessels, whether it be Russian freighters or, just regular maritime traffic, looking for encrypted messages or things of interest. And the NSA actually records most of that communication. I know they say that they only record foreign nationals calling into the U.S., but I think Snowden pretty much pointed that out, that that's not the truth. And I can verify that. So what else? But it has to be in clear view. Waves frequency bounce off glass, and you can probably eavesdrop from long distance as long as it. So line of sight, right? So what Sam is talking about is line of sight, and that works with most HF. And the antennas that we use for that type of stuff is Yagi antennas, right? So as long as you have line of sight to that signal with a directional antenna, you can pretty much pick it up. Where you get a little bit more difficult is so line of sight works with direct communication, usually AM, FM, UHF. But where it gets a little difficult is when you're using a sideband. Sidebands don't work that way, and it scatters. So you have to use different types of antennas for that. The AARL has an antenna book to kind of guide you through building antennas, what wavelengths. Most popular for ham radio is dipole antennas, which is a lead coming off of the radio and then going up and splitting off into two different, I call them arrays, but they're just two different leads. And you can do it with coax. And there's like endless amounts of instructions on how to build dipole antennas on the internet. There's no need to go out and buy like a $40 kit off of Amazon. You can basically take some cable TV coax and build it yourself. Oh yeah, so Mike pointed out exfiltrating data from air-gapped computers using screen brightness. So what I was talking about earlier, using RF. So monitors give out an emission just like every other piece of electronic equipment. And with the right SDR, and if you know the right frequency, you can actually catch that image from those machines and grab that data, whatever's on the screen, whether it be email or whatever. But really, I mean, like, so when voice really started getting big, and this goes back to like the beginning of the Cold War. So the State Department got a big, huge wall mount. Like, what was it? Was it a clock or was it a seal? It was like a seal, right?
It was the seal of the United States. It was a gift as a president, or to the president rather. Yeah. A little kid.
So,
like, here, Mr. President.
Yeah. So the seal of the U.S. Had in the back of it a microphone, and it would transmit.
But it was an analog microphone.
Yeah, analog. So it was really cool, and that was like a big story. And there's a museum. So I was born in D.C., and not far from where I was born. I was actually born at Fort Meade. So I was kind of born into the intelligence spy community. And there's a museum there called the International Spy Museum. It's really cool. So when you go into the museum, you pick your identity, and you have to learn everything about this person as you go through the museum and see all these different displays. And then at the end, you're quizzed as if, you know, someone from Russia is like interrogating you, and you have to remember everything that you learned from the very beginning, about your persona, your profile, or your dossier, to get past the end. That's really cool. Does the development of IoT and voice activation present a risk on RF level? Yes. So IoT relies heavily on RF transmission. Some of the pumps in the field, I know I talked about this in my last podcast. The IoT devices actually use RF propagation to certain controllers. So if you know RF, you can grab that data. The data may be kind of, how do I say this, like non-readable unless you know the pump it's coming from, and able to decipher it. But the cool thing about RF from IoT is I can use an RF jammer and shut down that communication from that pump as if it doesn't exist. Sorry, y'all, I'm muted, reserving video to save bandwidth. We really are in third world country. Yeah. Okay, so have a look at this IoT perspective. Can you pull that up? So I'll go over like the rules of intelligence gathering. So when I first got to intelligence school, one of the classes was, in the very beginning, it was very basic, and I actually thought it was a joke, but they sat us all down and they said, you're not allowed to go to bars, you're not allowed to take the same route home, you need to mix up your routes as you go, through the week. Don't ever be predictable, basically. And if you do end up at a bar somewhere, never accept a drink from any female. So they like to do that, especially, I don't know if you guys remember, but it was about 10 years ago, there was a Russian spy ring. They got busted up in the East Coast. I want to say it was New Jersey. But one of the spies was like supermodel level, and she was very successful at what she did. We ended up trading some people or some sort of ransom. Yeah, Anna Chapman. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name because that's English writing. Yeah, yeah. So she single-handedly like took down a lot of agents in the U.S. and ended up getting kicked out. Does your tattoos involve some info that needs to be decoded like the one in Prison Break, Blind Spot, or is it just straightforward one? So, okay, let's see. 1, 2. So there's 3 tattoos that have a hidden meaning. One of them's a QR code, one of them's binary, and the other one's hex. The hex is on my hand, the QR code's on my wrist, and the binary is a bracelet that goes around my wrist. And they do have a meaning, and the QR code used to be scannable, but as time goes by and tattoos and things kind of fade, they're harder to read. But yeah, they did have a distinct meaning. So some of the other stuff too, I'm thinking about creating a website strictly for intelligence gathering and OSINT. If any of you guys are interested in OSINT, in RF, in number stations, international intelligence gathering, let me know so that we can join together and kind of develop this together. We have, so far on my laptop, I think I have like 20 recordings of number stations. I'm going to go ahead right now and upload maybe another one that you guys can listen to. Let's see if I can find a good CW one. Here you go. So this is a Morse code recording that I took today. I believe it's today, of one of the stations that randomly popped up somewhere in between the Chinese maritime frequencies. So, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff out there. I do have a link. I don't have it available right now, but I will give it to you upon request, of a guy in Europe that gave me every internet-based wideband online radio available. So you can listen from different stations around the world, whether it be Thailand or Vietnam or Australia. It spans the entire globe. So there's no RF or no frequency that we can't monitor from here, which makes it really cool, because so before the dawn of like internet-based radio or IRLP, you had to actually have a base station or an HT, which is a handheld, to listen to different frequencies, or scanners. I don't like scanners or CBs, but you know, they do serve their purpose. But now with the internet and with so many people involved in RF, there's online radios that you can access for free, and they run 24/7. And it's funny because there's a whole community of people that do nothing but listen for odd transmissions or number stations or military transmissions. So it's all out there. Is RF energy from Wi-Fi any use? I'm not really sure I understand that question. So RF is different. It's electronic emission. So you have UHF, VHF, MF, and then you have the gigahertz, right? So most of the number stations reside in like somewhere between 1,000 kilohertz to like, I want to say like 5,000 kilohertz. But Wi-Fi is going to be your 2.4 gigahertz. So that's, I mean, it's a completely different spectrum. If you look up radio frequency spectrums, it'll break down, and it can get confusing if you're new to RF, the different bands and privileges for each band. ARL has a map, or kind of like a diagram of the amateur radio frequencies, and it pretty much covers the spectrum as to where amateurs can transmit legally, depending on your level of certification. So I have a general ticket, so that that kind of opens up most frequencies to me and most methods of transmission, whether it be slow scan TV or data or RTTY or Morse code. But there are other frequencies, very few, that the extra ticket gives you access to. I'm kind of tossing around the idea of getting that ticket, but right now I'm just having fun with the AM band and wideband radio shortwave. And you can buy shortwave radios online for what, Mike, but like $100?
$100 or less, yeah.
Yeah, and
really
so
good ones for about 150, but for everyday use, $80.
Yeah, so I mean, like, you can buy one of those online, and they come with an antenna, but they also have the capability of building your own antenna. And then you go into, like, if you want to spend more money and reach further, you can actually get like a base station that's shortwave. A lot of military carry shortwave radios. We call them KIVs in the Navy. But those are the guys that have the heavy backpacks with the huge antennas, and usually the first one's targeted during, combat. Have you ever deciphered any message being transmitted or come across a key to decipher them? So no, the funny thing about these messages are, like I said before, they use an encryption method, like one-time pad. Unless you know what pad they're using or what cipher key they're using, it's pretty much impossible. But you can kind of decipher the format. So null messages have pretty much the same characters repeated over and over again. So one of the ones that we decoded from Poland, a female voice from Poland, she identified the operator, let's say operator or agent 925, and an oblique 00, which means null message, right? So they had no message for that agent that day. Now, and the oblique is the slash. So if she would have came on and said 926 oblique and then rattled off, a couple sets of numbers, then there would be an actual message there that would correspond with a one-time pad. I've come across a few channels on the Dutch radio that when I looked up the frequencies, they came back as faxes. I've not checked to see if there's something that can be. Yes. So Lucas, those faxes, if you can collect that traffic and they're transmitting images, I can possibly get the images out of that packet capture. So that goes into a whole other realm of like steganography. So some of those images have hidden messages. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of data in some of those. And also what I ran into, and I'll have to post this once we get off of here. I was waiting for a number station to come on, and it was from China. And right before the number station came on, there was like lower sideband, upper sideband, like the screen went crazy with like red, yellow, and white, which is basically the signal. So they flooded the frequency with all these different types of communications to hide the one specific type of communication you're trying to get through. So that takes a little bit more advanced level of expertise to get past those filters and get down to the message. How is key exchange handled for one-time pass? So the one-time pad, they use, like, you can create your own one-time pad. And the link that we set up, that we posted earlier, the linuxcoffee.com/numbers, basically gives you a type of application where you can create your own one-time pad. And so let's say you and an agent that works for you or works with you, you can print those one-time pads out and distribute them. I mean, you can come up with your own Caesar cipher as well. There's all different types of methods. There's not one specific type of OTP. pretty much every agency and every number station creates their own. And usually they're like burn after read. So once you get the message, you know, and you decipher it, those paths are burnt. Which is the most strongest cipher that you've come across? It's been years still used, or is it a good method to even use that? So, I mean, it's a decent method, but, you know, looking at RF and looking at the current, I guess, technology level, there's so many different ways to get covert comms out, whether it be through PGP or even a number station online or Stego, or, I mean, there's all kinds of methods. So I'm kind of interested in RF simply because of the fact that, you know, I'm part of a red team, and when you go in to do a tabletop exercise, you know, let's say they have like really advanced IPSs, machine learning, AI platforms, it's going to be hard to exfiltrate data out of those networks, given the current technology. But all I need is my phone and some RF, and I can get that message out. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. You know, I think that, you know, as an industry, we've gotten so far as technology goes, and as far as alerting and signatures of things that are passed on the wire. And we focus so heavily on the wire and with Wi-Fi, which is very high, you know, HF. But I haven't seen a company yet that looks and is concerned about RF unless you're military. No large corporations use RF detectors as far as I know. Because if they did, you would have to work in a Faraday cage, basically, to protect that.
FBI, CIA,
NSA.
Those guys all, yeah, they have those in place, but yeah, no, nothing at major corporations.
Yeah.
Maybe the financial sector, but I haven't seen it.
No, they don't have it. Pattern image analysis skills are useful in sniffing out hidden useful information inside of other transmissions. Mike and I regularly see the waterfall. Yeah. Yeah, so the waterfalls, if you go to that website from the Netherlands and listen to some of that communication, you'll be able to identify, after looking at patterns from the waterfall, what type of traffic it is. So Morse code has a distinct waterfall where it's dots and dashes. Upper sideband kind of looks like, it's hard to explain, kind of stacked blips. And then of course, AM is kind of a wide, broad, back and forth kind of lines. But once you start listening to it on a regular basis, you'll start to pick up those patterns. And so in the military, one of the things that I did was I got used to looking at PRI and pre-RF. So if I saw the PRI, I could almost tell you what type of weapon system it was or what type of weapon it was. So part of my job was I was a NATO emitters database manager for all of the Atlantic Fleet. So I could take a look at an emission and determine if it was NATO or not, and log that into the database and work with NSA on categorizing that stuff. What can be done about that, though, beyond recommending a Faraday cage at the office? Absolutely nothing. And that's what's cool about it. And that's why I'm going to start developing more tools for this. So like I said, my friend James, he's part of an intelligence company, and he's sending me 2 chips this week that go onto Arduino for transmitting data over frequencies. So I plan on working with him and with Mike and developing a tool for this and writing a paper. I'll probably get shut down pretty quick, but it'll be really cool. Let's see. Yeah, Chris has a really good signal identification guide. Thanks. So there's a lot of equipment that goes into play. Like if you want to build your own listening station or listening posts, like they have in Bavaria, like Stuttgart has a really good one. Minworth Hill in the UK has a really good listening post. There's a lot of equipment that goes into that. multiple types of antennas, golf balls, arrays, Yagis. And then you have like the oscilloscope, spectrum analyzer, base stations, and other classified appliances that go into it. But that's the really hardcore, like defense level listening post. But you can create your own just based off of, you can do it with a Raspberry Pi and an RTL SDR, which is it's USB, plugs in, you got your ham it up, which gives you access to frequencies from 100 hertz to, I want to say 10 megs. Don't quote me on that, but I know it's as low as 100 kilohertz. And most of your transmissions for number stations are going to be like 4,000 kilohertz. So what else? What else do you guys want to, you have any more questions, or does anybody want to speak up? You can take yourself off mute.
So there's a lot of resources out there from AARL and other sources, and just tons of websites where a lot of the good old school radio operators, all they want to do is share. So you just, use your Google foo and go for it. And whatever you're thinking of, or whatever you think you might want to do, if you think it's something different, or if it's something you've heard about, just Google it. You'll find it. A lot of these old guys, a lot of the spectrum that I listen to is, I call it the old farts roundtable jokingly, but it's a lot of old guys DXing around the world, just talking about what's going on around them, what's going on with politics, what's going on with, oh, hey, I just upgraded my antenna box and my St. Bernard just pissed all over the end of it. And yeah, I got to redo some stuff. It's just, it's some of it's inane and stupid, and some of it's interesting, and it's going to run, I hate to say it, the full spectrum, but yeah, it's out there. Just from stepping through the spectrum, seeing the signals, seeing the waterfall, and listening in, tuning in, I start finding little things. An Irish broadcast about how they're starting to lock down things. I can't remember the other country, but they were talking about the U.S. elections, and then, then keep scrolling, and I find my old farts roundtable of these three old guys from the East Coast that are talking about everything from the weather to, hold on, I got to run to my truck and grab something. And then, oh yeah, I built this new 40 meter beam that I'm loving it, whatever. And so it's out there. And if you're interested and have any kind of inclination, start Googling it, and then start, asking around, because, just like Mike and I giving this stuff up, it's, there's a lot of other guys out there that are way more knowledgeable than me, but they've done it, they've been there, and they're not afraid to share. So yeah, just check it out.
So Kristen had a question. Could you speak about overall workflow you follow or tools you use to analyze some of the data collected? So it depends on the type of transmission. So if it's AM, it's usually voice, and that's pretty easy to write down and follow. I record the numbers that are read out in what sequence, to learn the format and any variations of the format, and who it comes from. Sometimes the language is a little confusing. Like recently, we had somebody from Russia that had a really bad American accent. So it was really hard to figure out exactly what they were saying. Plus, with the squelch and some of the background noise, it was really hard to decipher. So we tossed that around for a while, back and forth between people, to get it deciphered, and I was able to get it deciphered. Now, if it's Morse code, with some of these websites, you can actually record the Morse code. And you can do it on your own machine as well. Like if you're using like a base station, you can plug it into Audacity, record the Morse code. And there's several different websites that will take an audio file recorded, upload it, play it, and it will decipher the Morse code. Now, one thing you have to understand is when you're taking recording of Morse code, they're using a one-time pad to type out some of these messages. There's only a few instances where I've seen clear text Morse code. And usually that's between like maritime, like cargo ships. But if it's a number station, one thing you have to realize is they've been doing this for such a long time, World War II, basically, that they had gotten to an advanced stage where they make it very, very difficult to understand what they're talking about unless you can find that agent. Now they've kind of tracked some of these number stations and the people that read the messages. We're able to tell which ones are read live, which ones are recordings, you know, the format of the message based on previous messages, time of day. I mean, they've got it down to a schedule. So what's really cool is like looking at the one website, priyam.org, and it'll tell you next station is live in 15 minutes. So I set my online shortwave radio to that frequency and just get ready to record. So I record the frequency, I record the waterfall, take a snapshot of the waterfall so that I have an image of that signal identification. And then like E11 is Poland. It's the number station out of Poland. So I create a folder with just E11 messages. So one thing I found interesting is that some of these guys have been doing this for a very long time, like priyam.org, that post a schedule and the frequencies to look for aren't always spot on. So just a couple of days ago, they predicted that according to the schedule, that E11 from Poland was supposed to be transmitting at this frequency at this time. Well, they recorded at that frequency, and there was a separate message that went over to another frequency just right after that. So really, you just have to scan the bands and look for those signals. Sometimes they're very faint, and you'll learn the nuances to the online wideband radios. You're able to narrow the frequency and switch from different modes like USB, LSB, CW. So when you get to a point where you've seen so many signals that you're able to identify what type of signal it is, it's pretty quick. You know, the first time finding that website and looking at the first number station, I think that first night we got like 4 or 5 recordings right off the bat. But it's really interesting, you know, and it takes me back to the times when, you know, you had the wind talkers, you had people during World War II, you had, you know, the whole story behind Cryptonomicon. And it's really cool because my grandfather was in World War II, and it kind of like gives me that connection. You just mentioned other more knowledgeable people. Would you mind sharing any, you know? Justice, so I will post here in a second the DXers forum. You have to be vetted, and they have to let you in because some of the information that they collect is on military ships, movement, nipper, sipper, you name it. They collect all of it, and they're able to identify ships. They're able to identify locations. So there's a vetting process that goes behind that, but you can try it. I got vetted for that forum the other night after talking to one of the guys. He's French Canadian. We have the same background. We actually worked at one of the same set crews. He was working for Canadian. So a little bit of background too is that I never worked with strictly military, U.S. military. I was always part of a joint function, whether it be, you know, Middle East or Eastern Bloc or whatever. What else do we have? Anybody want to speak up and give their experience? Are there any operators, as far as like radio operators online with us right now that want to identify themselves with a call sign? I can't be the only one. I mean, this is a room of techie people. I can't be the only radio geek. So my call sign out of Virginia, And yes, it's out of Langley, Virginia, by the way, KG4ZFX. So they keep a pretty tight database of people who have operator license. So let me put that in the main chat room in case you're DXing and you want to find me. So, and Mike and I are actually building out a shack. I've been looking at different antenna structures, and what I really want to focus on is DXing to Eastern Europe, getting some of that signal for various purposes, and also Cuba and some of the other pink, maybe red states. I don't know.
Different kind of red, but
yeah, different category. So what else do we have? I know you guys have a plethora of questions. Assuming you don't TX, any general legal issues with RX?
none.
So with receiving transmissions, if you're able to grab the signal, there is nothing illegal about deciphering the signals.
Mm-hmm.
Transmitting, different. So we talked about this on the last podcast. We ordered some amateur radios from Baofeng, and they were able to transmit on EMS frequencies. Highly illegal, but China doesn't follow the same frequency rules that we do. So there is an issue with that. But as far as receiving, no. And what's really cool with RTL SDR is that your key fobs for your car, some electronic locks, basically everything that you use that gives off a RF signal can be grabbed and replayed by the RTL SDR. You need to look up Hack5 on YouTube, search Hack5 RTL SDR, and they will show you how to record a key fob unlocking a car and replaying it, as well as a doorbell, a Ring doorbell. It's Ring, right?
I think it was Ring.
Yeah, it was Ring.
I think it was Ring.
He had a Ring doorbell, and they recorded it with RTL SDR, replayed it, and his doorbell wouldn't stop ringing. It was really cool. You need the Hack RF or Yardstick one to transmit, though. Actually, no. With RTL SDR, you can only receive. But with the Ham It Up, if you connect it to other devices, you can transmit. Spun RTL SDR and antenna kit, I blame you. Well, I'll take that blame completely, and you'll completely enjoy it. But make sure when you get the RTL SDR that the dipole antenna base has the two male SMA connectors connected to the ends of it, because mine didn't. And so I had to shove the antennas, the telescoping antennas, into the side of the dipole base in order to get reception, which I did. I was able to transmit on ham radio frequencies, some other frequencies we won't mention, and collect AM. So it was really cool. But another thing you have to be careful too, JJ, is when you plug in RTL SDR and you're using it for extended amounts of time, it gets really hot. So maybe have a fan, a USB fan on that RTL SDR, or else you're going to burn it up.
Yeah, that's pretty much with anything that you're transmitting on. Receiving, you can receive all day long, but once you start pumping from there, it's imagine like your computer and the CPU. You can search all day long, but once you start using processor power to do anything else besides just receiving, like web pages, images, things like that, yeah, you're going to start generating heat. So yeah, with radios especially, it's a lot of heat generated. So there's a lot of different cases and things out there. Now there's a lot of preppers, and there's a lot of weird guys, and whoever with mods where you can take a certain case and you can build, you can put a small power supply in there. You can put a USB fan. You can do all kinds of things where all it's doing is evacuating heat, or it's bringing fresh air in. I usually like to evacuate heat more using heat sinks and everything like that. I don't like to bring things in. It's always a bad idea, but yeah, there's a lot of modders out there that are doing nothing but creating workarounds for everyday small problems, like the simplest USB plug-in SDR. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. So yeah, that's why I say, use your Google Foo and use your resources, and whatever you can think or dream up, somebody may have already done it. It happens to me a lot. I'm not a billionaire because there's already a billion other people who have my $1 idea. So there you go.
So let's go over dead drops really quick. Mike, can you Google dead drop?
Oh yeah.
So one of the things that I like to do that's been around for a long time, we used it in Anonymous, was dead drops. So in tradecraft for spy agencies, they use dead drops. Robert Hansen got busted dropping off stuff at a dead drop in a park in DC. But what we used in Anonymous was USB dead drops that were concreted into the side of buildings. And you would plug your computer in, get the information, and move on. And that's the same with any spy agency. There's always some sort of dead drop for either documentation or electronic devices. So, and you can Google that as well. There's tons of information about dead drops. I just posted another recording from Russia that I took, I guess it was like 2 days ago on the wideband radio. And there's so much information out there. If you take the RTL SDR and pop it up and just run it in your home, you would be amazed at the amount of RF signals that just float around you constantly. And depending on the ionosphere conditions, as far as like weather goes and humidity, et cetera, if you have really great ionosphere conditions, you can actually pick up, audio on AM on your radio from overseas. That's just one of the things I like to do is look at. So one of the things I had to learn was the different levels of the atmosphere in intelligence school. We had to learn about signal propagation through those different layers of the atmosphere. I had to learn about separate satellite missions that I can't go into. But then you have geostationary, you have different types of orbits that you follow. There's tons of information out there. What's really cool is there's a site that will tell you when the ISS space station is crossing your zip code. And they have a really cool thing where they transmit images from the space station down to Earth on amateur radio frequencies. So with slow scan TV, you can grab those images through your radio and basically decode them to see what they're looking at, or different pictures from the space station and the crew on board. But again, like, this stuff has been around forever, and there's so much information that is around you 24/7 that is just floating in the air, that is there to grab and to, like, decode and look at different patterns. So Ethernet is great. I love pen testing. I love I love pen testing computers and networks. I shouldn't say breaking in, but I do love that stuff. I love lock picking. I love jamming, all that stuff. But there's so much around you that with a simple antenna and a USB, you can collect and replay attacks. So with, IP, replay attacks are great, but with RF, they're unstoppable. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop me from getting into your car if I replay your key fob. And there's a really cool kid in the UK named Vincent Cook. I ran into him at Hack the Police in London, in Vauxhall. And me and Cham went, and there was this 16-year-old kid that was by himself. We had to break into teams, and we had to come up with a project and present it, in front of the whole conference. And he and I and Cham did a anti-drone application where we used 2.4 gigahertz drone and brought it down with MDK3 with a simple USB antenna. Great kid. And what's funny is I had a call last week with a group that has a platform called Jenny. So what Jenny does is it goes out to the internet and it categorizes all the cybersecurity companies that it can find, and grabs the white papers, grabs videos. So it's basically like a Yelp for cybersecurity. So instead of saying like, oh, I need a pen test this week, who do I call? You can log into Jenny and do a search for that, and it'll bring up all the best ones. So Tanesh, which is part of that group that engineered Jenny, is also working with Vincent on some of his companies. I've never met a kid at 16 years old that was so sharp. We kind of like adopted him as a son because he was so awesome, and his dad was so supportive. Like I didn't have that as a kid. Like my dad wasn't supportive, but his family is like really pushing him to go forward, and he has like potential that I can't even explain. Like the UK government should be afraid of this kid. We took him into the Met Police. I set up a meeting with the Met Police and with the director of cybersecurity unit over there. And we talked about the anti-drone technology, the Gatwick airport issues. And he's a go-getter, which is one thing that I think that most of our industry lacks, is that entrepreneurial spirit and the pure raw talent. A lot of people are book driven, people who learned how to hack a computer through a book or through an online course. But Vincent was one of the special ones that I was able to talk to, and immediately he got it. Cham is another one. So I've been helping Cham learn the ropes, and she's like really super sharp as well. Michael made his own drone, and I'm not sure what that is. So Simon, drone technology is really great. You can secure the SSH, but the problem with SSH is that drone, either depending on the manufacturer and the model, it has a GPS function. So like Cham's brother has a drone, the DJI Maverick, who has a GPS module built into it. So you can tell it to fly home, and it will actually fly back to where it lifted from based on the GPS coordinates. But all of those drones use a certain level of RF, use a certain level of GPS, which, I mean, it can be great, but there's ways around it. And there's ways to knock it down. Like literally, we ran our application against a drone at Hack the Police, and this other group was working on like facial recognition and stuff like that. And so they were using a drone to collect images to do the facial recognition. Well, we had developed the app to disable that drone, and they were willing to let us try it out. And so I talked about this on the last podcast, but basically what happens is when you send a drone an instruction and I hit it with my application, all it remembers is that last instruction, and that communication is dropped at that point. So when we did the demo, that drone literally hung in the air because it had nobody to give it instruction, and the guy lost complete control of the drone. So yeah, it's really cool. Worth talking with, trust me. Simon, I will definitely check that out. So Simon has an interesting background as well. He has worked with some of the people that I started with, I guess, with Anonymous. He knows some guys that I know here as well with like Sub 7. So yeah, he's pretty vocal. And I enjoy that. The more questions I get and the more like challenges, bring it on. Let's talk. I'm so open to conversation.
Guess what I'm wondering is, like, you know, you can either straight DOS the whole, you can jam the signal.
Oh yeah.
You can DOS it. Yeah. So it's that there's multiple aspects of bringing that drone down.
Yeah. So the drones that were inflicting pain upon Gatwick were the high level, like commercial drones, like really high level that run off of GPS. Not so much like 2.4 gigahertz, because most of your like hobbyist drones have an access point built on board. And those are easy to defeat with MDK3. But with RF jammers and the Yagi antenna, like you can totally set those down.
You gotta sever the RF.
Yeah.
And that is where drones, I'm gonna guess there's a huge percent of them that don't have a call home or a flyback frequency,
right?
Or a module. I know a guy in Israel that makes those, and he builds those in his drones. A lot of them don't. So when they lose that signal,
yeah, they just fall, or they use the last command that was sent to them. But the problem with like RF and drones is the fact that you're limited to distance, right?
Yes.
So Gatwick has sensors put up all around the airport that look at altitude and frequency,
right?
And they'll send that disconnect or that jam.
Oh, 100%.
But what's funny is with 2.4 gigahertz, if you sit outside a parking lot, Gatwick couldn't stop a hobbyist drone from getting into the airstrip because they had no 2.4.
That they can fly lower.
So it's pretty cool.
For every engineered and elegant solution, there's brute force, ignorance, and another avenue of attack that can just slide in there.
So Sam had an interesting question. He wanted to know if I had a go at the crypto statue at FBI headquarters. Actually, Sam, is not at the FBI headquarters. It's at the CIA headquarters in Langley. Everybody's had a go at it. Nobody has figured it out. There's a group called Cicada, and I don't know if you guys have heard of Cicada. They were posting crypto puzzles all over the US. At one point, they thought it was a recruitment prop for the US Navy for cryptology. Other people thought it was NSA or CIA. But the crypto statue at the CIA headquarters in Langley is public, and you can go in and check it out. But I don't know anybody who's even come close to deciphering that. And Cicada is really cool. If you go and look at Cicada, nobody's been able to decipher those either. If it was the U.S. Navy trying to recruit cryptologists, they failed horribly. If it was CIA, depends. Really CIA. So a little bit more about my background. I worked for a company called Eyesight Partners, and my ex-boss was a field officer in the Morocco office from the CIA. So I got to be exposed and did some stuff with CIA. At one point, we had to have really high level clearances and polygraphs and crazy stuff. There's a long story that goes with Eyesight Partners, and there's a reason why I didn't stay with them, but we won't dive into that. Let's see. So Sam, if you figure out the CIA encryption on that statue, I personally will pay you. Michael claims he can intercept the Russians. He is a guy who loves SDR. Absolutely. So the file that I just posted previously was from Russia, and it was a number station in Russia, and you don't need SDR to record it. I actually use the online wideband radio from the Netherlands to collect that data. Sam, have a good one. Thanks for logging in. He worked for Hacker House. He's part of Null Security. So again, like, you don't necessarily have to have SDR to record signals out of Russia. There are all kinds of different online radios you can access, whether it be Germany, Poland, or somewhere close to Eastern Bloc, that do that live, and you can just log into it.
And there are other spots around the world where they...
Oh, there's tons of... So the same signal you hear in Russia, you can probably log into, I don't know, parts of Australia and pick up that.
If you have an Argentinian grandfather who has German descendants, yeah, you can do it there too. Just saying.
So yeah, that brings up another topic. So if you look at post-World War II in South America, there are large concentrations of German heritage in that area. There's actually a boys' school that has Nazi symbols all over it. So after World War II, a lot of the Nazis escaped, went to South America, and the way they communicated was shortwave radio. And that's been around forever, and it's never going anywhere. So those repeaters, Simon, are also on the internet. It depends on what frequency you're looking at. It depends on the location, but I would be hard pressed if you gave me a country, I would be hard pressed to say that I couldn't find a repeater online from that country. So you don't necessarily have to build an antenna and a shack like we're going to. You can do it from the internet. And that's why I wanted to put together this podcast, because grabbing the spy communication, this intelligence communication, can be done from your living room with a laptop. You don't need anything like spectacular to do it. It's really simple. And we just wanted to give you guys the tools so that you could do it yourself and get interested in RF. Because really, I mean, IP is great, but when you're looking at covert channels, IP is not really that safe. There's other methods of communication that are much better.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what I was saying. If you basically, anything you can think of, conceptualize, or Google, really, it's out there. There's so many guys willing to share their knowledge. And there's so many guys out there that have been doing this longer and are so deep into it that they don't care. They're just going to be like, hey, man, yeah, hey, here's what I did. So it's great. It's a very, very, very liberal, not liberal. I don't mean to use that in that sense. It's a very free medium. Everybody is very willing and eager to exchange knowledge. So it's a good information share. It's a good test bed for any idea you have. So yeah, man. Mike and I are constantly bouncing things off of each other, and then I'm like, oh, I read this article, and he's like, oh man, I just did this, and so it's back and forth all day long. It's great. And there are so many other guys out there that are already doing it. They already have their shack set up. They may have an SDR. They may have whatever. And you can piggyback off of that. So you don't have to invest much up front. I mean, we did it because we were like, we want to do this, and this. We had set goals. But a lot of what we're doing, we could have done without even spending a dime. All we had to do was Google and find those resources, because those resources are everywhere. So yeah, it's limited only by your curiosity and your drive. That's it.
So another thing I wanted to go over too real quick was, so there's a messaging system called M3 in the military. It used to be used over telegraph. It used to be used over Morse code. But it's now like a connected system through DISA on SIPRnet. SIPR, for those of you who aren't military, SIPR is a secret network. NIPR is like the more general network, and you have the green level.
So there's SIPR is secret, like kind of super secret. NIPR is the it's classified, but it's not general knowledge. And then there's unclass.
So
a very, very,
So there's someone on this podcast as well that their significant other was a Navy SEAL. So I did SWCC, which for those of you who don't know what SWCC is, SWCC is Special Warfare Combat Crew. And we provided comms and insertion and extraction for the different teams. And one thing that we did with the military that's pretty common practice is you shut down a grid when you enter into a country, whether it be by carbon fiber ribbon or through signal jamming. There's all sorts of methods that we use for killing the infrastructure. So I won't say who that person is for anonymity, but I'm sure I've crossed paths with their significant other at one point. So let's go over the different structures for intelligence gathering. So you have imagery analysis, you have RF, you have radio, you have HUMINT, you have OSINT,
SIGINT, HUMINT,
ELINT,
OSINT, and
ELINT.
ELINT.
So ELINT is electronic intelligence, and that's some of the cool stuff. SIGINT is more like identifying signals. HUMINT is human intelligence. OSINT is open source intelligence, which a lot of pen testers still do, which I hope you guys are good at. And I mean, there's various forms of intelligence. This podcast, we're focusing specifically on signal intelligence, kind of electronic intelligence as well, but more focused towards signal. Where do I find people like you guys? Everyone I talk to is complete spook, keeping things under lock and key. So Noel, I used to be that spook who kept things under lock and key until I left the military and left the government. Was really disenfranchised with the way that we were handling intelligence and the way that we were falsifying intelligence. The cloak and dagger had gotten too much dagger instead of cloak. But there's plenty of us out there. We're actually thinking about doing another podcast for those type of people who are ex-military that are kind of in the same situation I am, where the government has basically made life so difficult for you that you become what I call a zero.
You're disenfranchised, excommunicated, kind of, that whole stigma, you know.
Yeah. I was a patriot at one point. I served twice in the military, both honorable discharges, medals, security clearances, TS, SCI. The problem was when I got out and spoke for myself, they didn't like it. And that's how Anonymous was born.
Well, to that end, I would say you're still a patriot. You're not a patriot. It's
I don't.
a nuanced thing because you still believe in what you set out to do. It's just that what you set out to do is different than what the people that you were backing want to do. So you're still the same guy.
To put it in shorthand, the election. That's all that needs to be said.
Fubar.
So, I mean, in the U.S., I don't know if you guys in the U.K. have followed the progression for politics in the U.S., but it's become a freight train on high speed, full speed ahead, straight to hell. And
I would argue that it's a dumpster fire.
Yeah, that too.
Downhill in San Francisco with nothing to stop it.
Yeah, that too. We had Trump kicked out the Chinese consulate in Houston before I went back to the States, before I came back to the States. And before they left, they started a bonfire in their courtyard of the consulate, burning intelligence documents that they were collecting at the medical center, regarding vaccinations and et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at the whole entire, like the bigger picture and the intelligence efforts around the globe, we struggle. The U.S. struggles when it comes to that. You look at some of the Joint Chiefs, some of the NSA, some of the FBI. We've really struggled as a country to maintain that unbiased approach to intelligence. And that's kind of what I was expecting when I went into my intelligence career. Was I was expecting to walk in, have a target, and collect and have that intelligence analyzed and appropriated. But that's not always what happens. Like when I view satellite imagery from country X and see flatbed semis leaving a country with what could be weapons of mass destruction, and them telling me, well, that's not really important. The fact is there's no WMDs in that country. That's kind of discerning. So after my second enlistment, I left, became a contractor at the U.S. Joint Forces Command in the C&D cell. And some of this will be like Kaspersky's going to be doing a documentary on my journey through, my career, where I'm at now. And that'll be covered. A friend of mine on the West Coast, Nick Nam, ex-Marine, signal intelligence guy, super smart, saved my life in Baltimore. He'll be talking about that as well. There's a lot of stuff. I was involved in Operation Titan Rain, which was an Asian attack against government and military installations to not allow service, exfiltrating data. I actually got an award from USJFCOM for stopping a DNS attack that was part of Operation Titan Rain. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on at the government level that a lot of people don't know. By the way, Titan Rain was declassified, so you can look that up on Wikipedia. I'm not disclosing any classified information. So yeah, that's that. Any other questions? You guys can unmute and talk and ask me questions. Open up your video unless you're afraid to disclose your identity. It's up to you. But I do this podcast for you guys, for the interaction. By the way, this podcast is being recorded so that we can post it online. I had a lot of inquiries about recordings of this podcast, specifically this podcast. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that. It'll be posted probably on YouTube, and there'll be links on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Probably should have said that really at the beginning.
Yeah, I know. But I mean,
I saw the button.
I mean, it's being recorded locally. If anybody has any problems with it being posted, let me know. I have no problems with not posting it. But I had such a positive feedback from this podcast that I wanted to make it available for people who couldn't make it.
Well, and good night. I have to go and have dinner. Hubby is making dinner, but this was eye-opening and scary, and thank you. See you next time.
So Vicky, before you go, the spy series and the covert channel series, would that be something you'd be interested in seeing more of, or do you want me to cover different topics?
The spy series is interesting. I mean, I know it's been going on for thousands and thousands of years, but
absolutely,
what you know now, whoa, I'm scared.
I'll expand on it. I think the next podcast will be close to Christmas, and I'll dive into a specific piece of spy gear. If you guys want to know about any type of technology like spy technology, please email me, and I will, more than likely I've played with it or I have it, and we'll dive into it and I'll teach you how to use it.
Cool, thanks. See you next time.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Vicky.
Bye, Frenchie.
So what else we got? Who else is still up and ready to converse? I know that Kristen has been posting questions. Kristen, do you have anything else for the podcast that you want to talk about or want me to explain? I don't know if she's still here or not. Let me check.
I don't see her.
No?
Nope. Oh, yeah, there she is. Yep, she's there.
Okay. Oh, she's eating dinner. So what else to talk about? Oh, there's another really cool device that I want to talk about. It's not spy gear, but it's a lot of fun, and you can buy it online. It's a kit, and it builds like, literally it's a board about that big with a toggle button. And when you program it, so it's got like 400 types of television sets built into this list, right, for universal codes. So you build this board, it's like $10. You can walk into like any sports bar and turn off all the TVs. It's fantastic, dude.
We need to do that because I hate watching golf.
Yeah. So you can buy it. I can't remember what website it's on. I'll post it on LinkedIn when I find it. But I built one a couple of years ago and walked into a company called Fry's. For those of you who live in the States, it's a big electronics department. And so they have like millions of TV sets, and I had it in my pocket. It literally fits in your pocket with one AA battery or two AA batteries, and you can hit the toggle switch and it'll alternate through the codes until it finds the right one to connect to the TVs and shut them off. And so I was standing there with a kid, and we're looking at these TVs, and I hit the button in my pocket, and all the shit went off, and Fry's about went maniacal. Like they couldn't understand what was going on. Some other really cool equipment too is like I talked about before was a USB rubber ducky. I made a one-line code to execute PowerShell to give me a reverse shell remotely on the internet to a domain. And so we went to Fry's and we plugged it into every laptop because they didn't have USB disabled. And when I got home, I had like 50 shells for Fry's. Well, theoretically, I had 50 shells. I knew somebody who did that, who got 50 shells from Fry's. And
There was a guy.
Yeah, one guy. But it was really cool. So, yeah, Kim, I will give you the link to that device. It takes some soldering. I think there's like 3 or 4 diodes you have to solder on, and then the toggle switch, and a battery pack. So what else? What else you guys got? Let's interact. Any thoughts or stories on physical pen testing? Justice. So physical means is one of my specialties as well, as far as like RF and VoIP covert channels. Lock picking. There's tons of lock picking sets you can get. RFID tags. There's all kinds of exploit kits for RFID, especially on Kali. It depends on what level of physical pen testing you want to do. So